Minyan Rishon Lamala, 6:30. Minyan Rishon Lamala, 6:30. Shani Minyan Shani is 7:30, and Shmona po. אני לא פה בשמונה, but יש מניין פה שמונה, יש מניין למטה. צריך לדבר להם הגבאי, אהרון. בוקר טוב. Okay, have a great day. We are starting the Gemara on Zayin Amar Aleph. Zayin Amar Aleph. We are on A2. A2 or A1? A1. A1 on the right side. Carmelite. We said yesterday, we mentioned there's a certain domain called the Carmelite. The Carmelite is a domain that's not the Reshut Rabim and not the Reshut Yachid. It's not public property. It's not private property. And on a Torah level, if you're allowed to carry in the Carmelite, you're allowed to go from private to a Carmelite, from public to a Carmelite. The Rabbanan said that you can't carry within the Carmelite 4 Tvachim. You can't go ahead and 4 Amot. Sorry, you can't carry from public to a Carmelite or private to a Carmelite. They created this domain. They made this a domain, a place of prohibited domain. Like they made it like in a certain sense, like a Reshut Rabim. And they gave it, and they made it also like a Reshut. They gave it the status of an area that's prohibited to carry. And that was because of people will make a mistake because it has some resemblances, it has some similarities to public and to private. So that is the reason for the Carmelite. So the Gemara stated earlier that there are certain areas that are called the Carmelite, like we mentioned, the ocean, the valley, the fields. On the one hand, the ocean is open, people go. It resembles a public property, but it's not doesn't resemble public property completely because it's not the common place that people travel. So it has resemblances of public, resemblances of private. So therefore, the rabbi said you have to treat it. They made this a prohibited area. And Gemara mentioned different cases of the sea, the valley, and then the Gemara also said, and the Carmelite. So the Gemara asked the question, the sea and the valley is the Carmelite. So what are you adding by saying Veha Carmelite? Why are you saying these extra words? What does it mean, and the Carmelite? Those are Carmelite. The Gemara says, Ki Oter Rav Dimi Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Dimi came back from the Holy Land. Rabbi Yochanan was the big rabbi in Israel. He said, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, we need it for a certain corner that was close to the Reshut Rabim, meaning to say, so there's different cases. If you look in the art scroll, because they have nice pictures. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Rashi brings 2 possible cases that we're talking about. Case 1 is if you see the houses, if you see note number 11, one of the houses was a little bit pushed more inside, and therefore there was space outside the house that went from that space was adjacent to the public property. So now if a public sometimes would walk into that area, it's the corner. And because they would walk into that area, so the question is, what status does that area have? It's not the normal, it's off to the side, so to speak. It's on the side. They got to go in. It's not in a straight flow. So because it's not in the normal flow of the public property, it would be considered non-public property. But at the same time, it's also considered a Carmelite. It's not considered private property because so the question is, why isn't it considered private property? You don't have 4 walls around it, right? You see, there's only 3 walls around it. But the question is, the commentaries ask, but we know to be a reshut your private property, you just need 3 walls. You don't need 4 walls. So in diagram number 1, it should be a private property, to have the status of private property, which should require just some sort of you know, like Surat Pesach, like a lot of people do in front of their houses, in front by their lawn, just to put some sort of a roof, some sort of string with some boards, sideboards, but not that it's, that area is considered private on a Torah level. Just rabbinically, you have to do something so people should know this is called private and this is public. But it's not a Carmelite. It's not a Carmelite means it's not private or public on a Torah level. If it's surrounded by 3 walls, it should be considered private on a Torah level. So that is the question that they ask. Why is that area considered? Why is the area considered non-private on a Torah level? If you see picture number 1, you have the 3 walls. The wall of house number 1 on the side, on the right side, on the left side. There's the walls of the 2 adjacent houses, and it's the wall of this house itself. So you're surrounded by 3 walls. So therefore, some say, there is an opinion out there that in order to be a private property, you have to have 4 walls. It's not the common opinion. The common opinion is that 3 walls is enough. So one of the answers that they give is so if you go with if you hold you need 4 walls to be private, so that's why it's not considered private property on a Torah level. But if you hold 3 walls need to be private, 3 walls is enough to be private. So some want to say, if you go look at diagram number 2, it says over there, that space is not surrounded by 3 walls. You see, when it's on a diagonal, when the house is on a diagonal, on that angle over there, looks like an arrow, like when you make that, you put those notes, you see that where that angle is. So therefore, it's on the space in between your house, the middle house, and the side house only has 2 walls surrounding it. Same thing on the other side of the angle. There's only 2 walls surrounding it. Since there's only 2 walls surrounding it, so therefore that's why it's not considered a private property on a Torah level. It's not private on a Torah level, and it's not public on a Torah level because it's not the regular walk of the public property. That is how you could explain some of this point. So the Gemara continues. So that's what the Gemara says. This is the case. We're coming to add on to this case. This is the case of the Carmelite that we're coming to add. This corner, this empty space, a nook adjacent to a public space. What's the chidush? What's the novelty? The novelty is that even though the rabbim sometimes, when there's an overflow in the public, they will go into the space, but since it's not easy, it's on the regular walk path, he Carmelite dummy has a status like a Carmelite, and it's not considered public property because it's not on the regular normal walking of the path. Good morning, Nathan. We are on 7A2. I mean, you might have thought that since sometimes there would overflow into it, it would be considered public, but since it's to the side, it's not considered public. He Ati Rav Dima Rabbi Yochanan. Bein hamudim nidon kekarmelit. Between the pillars, there has a status of a Carmelite. Remember again, a Carmelite is an area which is not public and not private on a Torah level, and the rabbis made this area a forbidden area to carry within this area 4 amot, and the rabbi, you can't do 4 amot or more, and the rabbi said you cannot carry from public to this area, and you can't carry from private to this area, or from this area to public, this area to private. And now we have different situations. The Gemara named the valley, these fields as those type of places. We named the ocean as that type of place. We also named the staba, the benches in front of the stores as that type of place. So now the Gemara wants to say, here you have public property, but you have pillars in the public property where people would hang their wares, their merchandise, their curtains, their shirts, or whatever they're showing off to sell. To walk in between these, if you want to walk in between these amudim, if you walk in between them, that area in between is considered non-public property. So if you would pick up something outside these pillars and you would place something down within the pillars, it's not that you went from public to public. Let's say you walk 4 amot in public property and you stop in between the pillars. It's not called that you stopped in a place of obligation, because that would obligate you a karma chatat, because these between the pillars would have a status of a karmelit, a domain which is a rabbinic domain, issued rabbinic problems, but on a Torah level, there is no problem to put down something in this domain because it's not considered public on a Torah level because of the difficulty in walking through these blocks, these amudim, these pillars that are in public property, and it's not private property, of course. Doesn't have, it's not considered private property either. People, do go walk through it, and therefore you will not. You're not chayav. You're not in violation. We welcome Emmanuel. Emmanuel, we just discussed. We just started a case. The Gemara is going to continue discussing the case. If you imagine they have in public property pillars, and these pillars obviously make it difficult. It's hard to walk directly through these. Sometimes you have things in the street, very organized. You could have a row of something, and you could walk on the side of it, or however they're made in a way that it's not doesn't stop the regular normal flow of the traffic. Or let's say if you have pillars, pillar here, and a pillar here, you can walk right through easily. But if you have a pillar here, and then you have a pillar a little bit to the side, and it's not, there's a picture in the art scroll number 17, as you see those pillars, it's not a straight walk. You got to go ahead, instead of walking straight, if you want to go walk through, you got to move to the side a little bit when you're walking. If you want to walk directly through those pillars, it's not a straight walk. So therefore, there's a very big chidush here that they bring you back from the Holy Land, from Rabbi Yochanan. People go to the Holy Land, they pick up some souvenirs. So the souvenir that Rav Dimi picked up from the Holy Land was the report of the Torah study of Rabbi Yochanan, who was the leading rabbi in Israel. The Jerusalem Talmud he's the main man in Jerusalem, the main man in the Jerusalem Talmud Yerushalmi, and he said, and Rabbi Yochanan said that if you're walking the space between these pillars is considered non-public property. Definitely not private property. It's not public property on a Torah level. Of course, on a rabbinic level, the rabbis are not going to say, okay, it's a totally exempt area because it has some resemblances, definitely, of public. Good morning. You're looking for minyan? No. 7:30 upstairs. Yeah, they have upstairs. They have tefillin. Yeah, by the bima, there's a talit and tefillin. If you want, we're having a class here. You could join the class for a few minutes if you want. We have a class here. Yeah, they have on the bima. They have, for sure. Yeah. The Gemara Shabbat. Lots of Shabbat, morning Asaf. So comes the Gemara and it says that the Bein Amudim, between these pillars, they don't get karmelit. Has the status like a karmelit, where rabbinically problematic place to walk. My timer, not to carry. Even though the public walks through these pillars, we're on 782 on the first side, the left side. Since you don't walk directly, it's not a smooth walk, then it's not nidon carmelit. It does not have a status of public property, status of a carmelit. Just want to remind you to say the Birkat HaTorah first. You need to get the Gemara is right here. And if you want, you can sit at wherever you want to sit. It's all available. Yeah, no, perfect. Yes, you can sit. But you have to remember to say the Birkat HaTorah. You said Birkat HaShach, Lasok b'divrei Torah, al divrei Torah, v'harevna. Okay. So the Gemara says, yeah, no problem. The Siddur is right there. So the Gemara says, the Gemara continues. You have it. Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Zera says, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Istabah shelifnei amudim. The istabah, as we said, this is the bench. They had the benches in front of the pillars, and on these benches were the places where the people, the merchants, would sit on these benches. So istabah lifnei amudim nidon kekarmelit. Also, it has the status of a carmelit, just because people don't walk that area. Is an elevated block, an elevated area where the people sit, and they're sitting there. It's not a place of walking. It's not a place where the public walks through. So it does not have a status of public property. But of course, it's also not private. So the rabbis gave it a status also of a carmelit. So now the Gemara says the following. Now, Lamandi Amma Ben Hamudim, so you have two different rabbis. One rabbi talks about the case of between the pillars, and one rabbi talks the case of the benches. Now the question is, what is the bigger chidush? What is the more novel? And if you tell me something, the thing that the more novel, then of course you would understand the thing that's less, right? Let's look how the Gemara is going to play it out. Lamandi Amma Ben Hamudim. The one who says between the pillars are considered a carmelit, if between the pillars are considered the carmelit, kol shekain istabah. Certainly the place where the benches are. Now why is, because between the amudim, between the pillars, the traffic sometimes walks between the pillars. Right? It's just you gotta just move a little bit to the side. You gotta move a little bit, you gotta walk. You can't, it's not a straight walk. So you might have thought that's considered public property. You might have thought that the status, we are on 782 on the first column. Asaf, you hear what's happening? We have two cases. Just to bring, what's your name? Nisem. We have two cases in the Gemara. We have a case where a person is walking in the public property, but there are these pillars standing in the public property where the people would hang their merchandise. And because of these pillars, you can't walk straight in public. If you want to walk, you have to walk zigzag a little bit. That's case one. Case two is there's the benches that the people sit on, the merchants, the ones that are selling their wares. They sit on these benches outside. Let's say outside you have the store, and maybe they have, maybe if it's raining, they'll go inside the store. But generally they're outside. Like even today, you see people selling stuff in the street, and they have this area where they would sit outside, but people don't walk on that area because it's a little elevated, and it's a place where people they're sitting there. So both places have a status. They're not called public property. If you would put something down there, we said on Shabbat, to violate Shabbat on a Torah level, you have to either take something from private property and place it in public property, or public property and place it in private property, or 4 amot, 6 to 8 feet. If you walk pick up something in public and you put it down in public. But this space, the Gemara says, two different rabbis. One rabbi says, if you put it down by the benches, or you picked it up from the benches, the benches is not considered a place that's a domain that's a forbidden domain according to the Torah. If you would put it down on the benches, you did not put it in the restricted area, because the benches is not considered public, not considered private, because people don't walk through that. Similar in the Gemara, another rabbi says not only the benches is not considered public, even you're on the street, you're walking in the street. If you go between these pillars and you put something down there, or you pick something up from between the pillars, that area on a Torah level is not considered a problematic space. It's called a makom patur, an exempt area, and you would not be chayav. Now, what's the bigger chiddush? What's more novel? The second case is more novel, because people do walk between pillars. You don't walk by the benches. The public traffic doesn't walk by the benches. That's a little more to the side. But the public sometimes walks between the pillars. So now, if the rabbi tells us that if you walk between the pillars, it's not considered public on a Torah level, certainly by the benches, it's not public. But if the rabbi tells us if you walk between the benches is not public, but only the benches he's calling not public, but between the pillars would be public. Because if it's true that the rabbi who holds, if you go by the benches, it's considered, if going between the mudim, the pillars, it's considered non-public, so why tell us the small chidush? Why tell us the benches is not public? Tell us even between the pillars is not public. So if you tell me the benches is not public, implies that's not called public, but between the pillars, Asaf, is public. Because if the between the pillars is not public, so tell me the biggest novelty, and I'll know, of course, by the benches it's not public. But the fact that one of the rabbis only makes the statement, he says by the benches is not public. What does it imply? Morning. That between the pillars would be considered public. That's what the Gemara is going to say. The Gemara is going to say there is a argument, and there's a question that they ask the question: why does the Gemara bring the case of the benches? We already learned earlier about the benches, right? So why does the Gemara have to bring it again? The Gemara needs to bring the case of the benches because it's teaching us, perhaps, that only between the benches is considered non-public, but between the amudim, between the pillars, would be considered public. So therefore, maybe that's the necessity to bring us. Meaning, really, we already learned before. We all know, but the benches is not public. But by bringing it down here, it's teaching us. But by saying that's not public, implies that between the pillars, it is public. That's what said. Maybe that's an answer to the question: why do we need to bring that statement again? Because we're only bringing it, meaning we had that in a Breita. We had a Breita. The Breita says the benches on Vavam and Aleph. The Breita says the benches is considered non-public, right? That's what we identified that as one of the places that is not public. It's a Carmelite. So what are you going to bring it? And that's a Breita. And here we have an Amorah. We have an Amorah, a later rabbi telling us the same law. You don't need a later rabbi to repeat the early rabbi's law when there's no dispute on it. The answer is, God bless you, this rabbi by saying between the benches is a Carmelite, this rabbi is saying, and he's saying something more than just that. He's saying this is the Carmelite, this is not called public, but the case of the pillars, between the pillars, would be considered public. So that's how we could read the Gemara. So the Gemara says,
but why bring the pillars to the first place? If you assume it's automatically not public.
God bless you.
Assume it's not public.
So
Assume it is public. Why would you
Right. Then, so there's actually an argument on the pillars, meaning that's what the Gemara is going to say. Right. One opinion is going to say the pillars is public. The other opinion is going to say no, it's not public. Between the pillars is not public, but since it's not an easy move, it's not a straight move. You got to walk a little bit in between, and it's not a straight walk. It's not considered public. So so therefore we have two opinions on the pillars. That's what the Gemara is gonna say now. So that's what the Gemara said. Laman diyama, we're on Laman diyama, right? You got it. Laman diyama, the one who says ben hamudim, the one who says between the pillars is considered non-public. If that's not public when you're walking, and just the fact you got to walk a little bit like this, it's not public. Koshikin is tabat. Certainly by the benches where it's people are just sitting there. People don't walk there. So certainly it's not considered public between the benches. But Lamandi Amma, but the one who says it's tabat, the benches is not public. Oh, only the benches is tabat. Because the benches, you can't walk, it's not easy to walk there. People are sitting there. Of a bein hamudim, but between the pillars, the nichatas tishmei, it's easy for the people to use. It's just you got to just go. It'll be a little bit. I mean, it's not as straightforward, but it's not such a big deal to walk a little bit. Like that. Well, that's not considered a carmel. That's not considered a carmelite, an exempt area on a Torah level, just rabbinically prohibited. Rather, that opinion would hold that's considered public property. Lishnachrina, there's another version the Gemara says on this last thing that we just said, that the bein amudim, if it will be between the amudim, between the pillars, it would be considered public because the zimnin, the darsi le rabim. Because some people, sometimes, if there's a lot of traffic in the, people might walk a little bit. People do walk in between the pillars. Some people do walk between the pillars. So Reshut HaRabim Dami. It has a status of Reshut HaRabim, has a status of public property, and therefore, regarding Shabbat, it would be actually chayav. If you would place something down over there on Shabbat, between the pillars, it would be chayav. It would be in violation. Now, if you look at the picture of Bein Amudim, you see the picture note number 17. The Amudim, you have the length of the public property, you have the width of public property, right? So in halacha, in order to be called public property, the width has to be 16 amot. Why? 16 amot is, let's say, is about, what do you say? Okay, so right, it might be 32, feet, it might be 20, maybe 26, 28, whatever the measurement is, 20 something feet to 32 feet would be the 16 amot. But if the street is narrower, if the width is less than 16 amot, that's not considered a public place. That's not considered public area to be considered part of public area. So you hear that, everybody? You have to have a certain, besides, we spoke about different opinions about do you need 600,000 people, but here we have another point of the width has to be, now most streets, 32 amot, or even 32 feet, I'm sorry, or if you say, or between 24 and 816, yeah, between 24 and 32 feet. 24 feet is not, that's that's not the wide amount, right? But if a street is anywhere, 24 to 32, that is the question. What is that size of 16 amot? But if you're between that amount, if it has that meets the qualifications of the width. But if you look at the picture, you have now, because of these amudim, so you go upstairs. Very good. Thank you for joining. We're here Monday through Friday, anytime. there. We start 6:45, but we let you in anytime. Welcome. You'll see there'll also be a talit by the bima. You'll see a talit on the bench. Welcome. And the tefillin will be on the bima. So thank you for joining. So if you look at it, so now you don't see 16 amot. You don't have 16 amot from, if you have these pillars. Let's say this is the street, right? Right? And I have pillars here. I have pillars going on like this. So now if I don't have 16 amot from here to there, with the fact that these pillars are in the between, would they cut off the size of the street? Good morning, Emmanuel. You hear the question? Good morning, Emmanuel. This is the discussion we brought up to the table. We said there's an opinion in the Gemara that says, we just said that a street, to be considered public property, has to have a certain width, right? If a street is too narrow, right, it won't be considered public street. If let's say the whole town, this town, we're making a town, and we want to make the streets very, very narrow, and we're going to make the streets less than each street will be like maybe streets like in Meir Sharim, but they might still be 24 feet, wide. You know what I'm saying? How much is 24 feet? You know what I'm saying? If a person is 6 feet. If a person would be, you take four people going this way, that will make up the width, right? So if I have a street that's 16 amot wide, 24 to 32 feet wide, and the public goes there, that's called public place. But let's have a very, say it again? Yes, the sidewalk. Yes, because people walk on the sidewalk. That's people walk in the street. So most streets would fit that, right? Right, Asad? Most streets are that wide, right? What'd you say? So we can look up one of the, let's look at some small streets, right? More than anything. But now the fact that you have these poles, these pillars in the middle of the street, which is taking up some of the width of the street. So does that knock it out from being considered? You don't have a 16, you don't have a width of 16 amot. What if the street itself, if the building itself, if the houses themselves would come out and block and make it that you don't have 16 amot, that would be considered, it's not a public area. Because if you have such a small width of a street, you can understand that, Emmanuel. If the street is so like this, that's not public. It's not called a real public street. It has to have a certain width. But if you have these pillars, Nathan, right? So why is that? These pillars are taking up some of that space. So now you don't have 16 straight. You don't have 16 straight. I have a pillar. I don't have. Let's say I have this in the middle. I have this in the middle. I have that in the middle. I don't have 16 straight amot. So Tosfos says, in one answer, Tosfos says that since people do walk between these pillars, and outside these pillars, there is 16. There's 16 on this side of the pillar. Here, let's say this is the street, and I got the pillar here. And the pillar makes it now, I don't have 16 amot going from here to here. But over here, I do have 16 amot. The street is actually a 16 amot wide street. It happens to be this part of the street doesn't have it. Over here, I don't have 16 amot, but right afterwards, I have 16 amot. And people do walk between these pillars. So therefore, that does not invalidate, Tosfos says, does not take it away from, now it's no longer meets the dimensions of a street. Because if people walk through this area, people walk through these pillars are outside of this. There is 16 amot. It's not like if you would have the houses coming all in, then you don't have 16 amot width at all. But the fact that I have a certain spot within the width of the street, on this part of the street, there's a pillar. But now over here, I have no pillar, and I have 16 amot this over here. So therefore, this does not invalidate that requirement. And it's still considered a street of 16 MO wide. And this does not remove it from being that way. Yes.
What if you have stores on each side?
So if you have stores on each side, so they're the stores. So it depends. If the stores would be a whole line of stores,
Yeah.
that would and if it minimizes the street, now the street is not 16 MO. People can't walk. See, over here, it's true. I have the pillar here, but I don't have anything here. This is straight space, that's straight space. But if the stores are taking up a whole line of space, and now I don't have 16 on mode this way, then it's not considered a public property because it's too narrow.
That would have the current status of property, but it would still require.
Right. It would be considered, that area would be considered, let's say in Emmanuel's case, if you have stores all along, let's say you have a street, but you have all these stores that are private area, which are walled. The stores have walls, and they're taking up the space of the public property. And now the public property is the width of the street is less than the 16 MO on a Torah level. But on a rabbinic level, does it look like a public property? It looks like public property. So rabbinically, the rabbi said, we got to protect the people. The rabbi said, if you're going to carry in such a street, you know what's going to happen? You're going to carry in a street that actually meets the requirements of real public property.
Level, you just can't carry outside your house.
Exactly.
It's like almost like really, really difficult.
Right.
Where you could carry your building. Yeah, I know.
Right. So outside your house, so like we said, if you have, in your if it's your property and you have if you have 4 walls around it, that's considered enclosed.
Yeah.
If you have 3 walls around it, then we had the certain things you could put up a certain, sort of pets or something. But once you're not there, you can't carry it. Unless there's an A roof. Then you
said, no, it doesn't count.
because he said you can't. There's certain places you can't make an A roof. But Moshe Fine says there are certain places you could make an A roof, and he would say you could carry in those places. But Moshe is saying there's certain places that you can't make an A roof.
Or places where there's 600,000.
Exactly.
In the case where you mentioned where the property is yours, but it's not walled in, you would still have to put an A roof.
Right. If the property is yours, right.
Even if the property is yours, you still have to section it away.
Right. Exactly. Even though it's yours, it's my property.
That would not be able to carry over there.
Right. If it's open, if there's no walls in the back, just like if you have no walls in the front, you have to do something. You have to do something.
Rabbinic,
right. That's rabbinic. It's rabbinic if the public doesn't walk there. You know what I'm saying? Because if the public would walk there, then that might be a biblical issue. Meaning, if you have a house in the front of your house, right? That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, because if you let the public use it, meaning if you have in front of your house, you have an area. I own it, but let the public use it, walk through it. Then maybe you must probably have now it's lost the status.
So historically, poor people to come in and face their fields.
But the field is still not a place of public. People don't walk publicly. That wouldn't. It would not be considered public property on a Torah level. Have a great day, everybody. You too. Good to see you back, everybody. Jack, welcome back. Morning. With the